And we're live!
Hello!
Hello!
La, la, la.
And if anybody appreciates that intro, it would be somebody that we have coming on in a minute. Why is that?
Really, I don't know. Hello, all. It is Monday.
It is Monday,
But
but it's
think
early.
about it for a second. It's Monday night, generational change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and we don't have a young child that we have to take care of, so we're not necessarily concerned about going on at this time. But our guest is.
He's into the early bird.
We have to. Well, he's still good for the early bird. You know, when Jordan and I first connected,
It was at an early
about
bird.
6 years. No, the thing is that about 6 years ago, one of the first things that we had, connected on is the fact that he had the Kramer poster. And so that was the sign. I was like, okay, well, we want the Kramer. That was a great early episode, by the way. So we don't have any time to waste.
No.
Why would we? Why keep our audience waiting as well? We have our little funny intro, and now we have our guest. You know, he is the owner, producer, and ground reporter. All those things rolled into one of Status Coup News. He's our champion of investigative journalism. Jordan Chariton, welcome back to Generational Change.
Hey, Jordan.
Thank you for the early bird special. Happy to be here.
Well, we always go early when it's you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Or Grumbine also has that early bird tendency.
Yes. Well, for Steve and Jordan, who are basically given, carte blanche to come on our show when they have an opening in the schedule, we have to be. We are lucky enough to be able to be accommodated.
Yeah, no, it's good. And we need to know what's going on with UAW.
So why don't you tell Jordan exactly what happened today?
And he jumps down my throat. Well, and I don't take this as news. I just thought maybe it was something that happened this morning. Probably it's old news, but somebody that I know from Pilates class said that she heard that something happened this morning where there was a deal. So, and I haven't looked or anything. So I don't know if there's something that happened today. That was all I was suggesting, was whether or not something happened today. And he got all, what happens, people watch MSNBC. I'm like, I don't know what she watched.
Fair enough.
Jesus.
Jordan, is there a deal?
MSNBC could have put out propaganda about a deal.
I don't know. I'm just saying, was there anything new today?
No, I mean, Detroit Free Press, I think, put out an article that Stellantis was going to make its second proposal and that they had productive negotiations over the weekend. But I think it was more Stellantis floating it to make it put out the narrative that, it's these workers and this communist UAW president that are being unreasonable.
So there's no 46% increase over the next 6 years that was offered or something like that.
No, that's what they're asking for, but
okay.
That was
I didn't think so, but okay.
No, Ford offered 10%,
Right.
GM offered 10%, and Stellantis 14.5%. And these numbers are kind of deceiving because, well, they're not kind of, they are deceiving because essentially these workers, since the financial crash in 2008, they've basically given back about 7 to 10% of their wages.
Right.
So let's say they got a 10% increase. It's really just bringing them back to what they were making a decade ago. So that's why, in reality, what they're asking for is, upwards of a 30% increase because they just need to get back. The 10% is just getting them back to where they were before they gave back so much of the wages.
Right. I mean, essentially, they have arrearages that they would be entitled to if they had not given up their cost of living adjustment, which they did in order to help companies that then put all their windfall back into stock buybacks. So they're basically in their due, whatever they would have gotten over those amount of years. So you've got however many years, they should be getting that in arrearages. And
that's one of the demands as part of profit sharing, that for every dollar that goes back to stock buybacks, I don't have the exact number, but some of it go back to the workers. So, but I mean, to me, they're not. I mean, I would love it, but they're not going to get 46%. This is obviously, shoot for the stars, so you'll get more. The sticking point to me is going to be the two-tier system, which is not just UAW. I mean, UPS had to deal with this. Amazon has to deal with this, which is just, you got full-time workers and the temporary workers. The temporary workers are doing the exact same job, but getting paid, significantly less. And these companies don't want to change that because a lot of these companies thrive with temporary workers, seasonal workers, part-time workers. So that, I believe, is going to be one of the main sticking points, even if and these companies, after a prolonged strike, sweeten the pot in terms of wages, I think it could go on longer, because these companies don't want to get rid of the two-tier system. They also do not really want to provide a pension anymore, which is a problem.
Jordan, we have seen, particularly for the coming of age period, that was the 2016 Democratic Party primary, the most distinct difference between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton came to union endorsement. Whenever the rank and file had an opportunity to endorse, they always endorsed Bernie. Whenever it was the shareholders, as I like to call them, even though they call it a board, but when the shareholders made the decision, it always went to Hillary. Can you talk about the importance of this particular union, the United Auto Workers of America, and the fact that they are a true rank and file union, and what that means for other unions going forward?
Yeah, I think that politically, the importance is, the auto industry, it's all over the country, but it's pretty significant in the deindustrialized Rust Belt. And those are obviously swing states. Michigan is the capital of the auto industry. And Michigan, obviously, Trump got it in 16. Biden swung it back in 20. It's still a swing state. But, auto workers, there's kind of a domino effect from auto workers. It's the blue collar worker. So if the auto workers, with this new militant leadership in Sean Fain, the new president, if they feel that they are not getting actual support from they're not going to get real support from the Republicans, but if they think they're not getting support from the party that supposedly they're champions, he's already withholding an endorsement from Biden, Sean Fain, which is kind of unheard of for the UAW. He's actually exerting leverage. Maybe the quote unquote progressives in Congress could learn something. So I think that not that every worker is going to do what the head of the UAW does, but in this case, the workers are actually in simpatico with the leadership. It's usually the opposite, where the rank and file can't stand the leadership. From what I could tell, these workers are renewed under this new president, Sean Fain. He is speaking with them, updating them regularly. Usually these negotiations are in private. Workers are just speculating what's been offered. He's doing live streams twice a week now. Hey, here's what we're getting. Here's why it's insufficient. So if he doesn't endorse Biden, or they just choose not to endorse, I think that could have a down trickle effect in terms of a lot of these workers, not necessarily voting for Trump, but maybe just not voting for Biden.
I like him so much. And what impressed me the most about him was that when he was asked about whether or not what he was planning on endorsing Joe, he automatically made it about what the members would want to do. His first response wasn't anything about him. And that was something that was really telling. He made it very clear that it would be up to them, right. And it wasn't him. And you don't usually hear that.
No. And you see that, I've watched most of his live streams, that it's very, very focused on the we and kind of what the members want, and, sharing stories of members struggling. So this is very different. We're not talking we're talking within the last 10 years. You've had presidents of UAW, embezzlement, bribery.
Yeah.
So, he won by a very narrow margin. But also, this is the importance of, we talk about, when I've been on before, like the non-sexy stories. Well, it was a non-sexy story that there was this reform group in the UAW, United Workers for Democracy. And they are what pushed, UAWD is what pushed this new type of UAW election that happened earlier this year, where it was basically, in the past, there was this convoluted thing where basically the bosses basically chose. Whereas now it was just a direct election, one member, one vote. And that was the first time that happened because of UAWD. And that's why Fain was elected. So, these non-sexy they seem a little in the weeds, but it's important, because I don't think you would have gotten this type of president, and he's setting the agenda. Even little things like the media was aghast. Well, usually at the beginning of negotiations, it's symbolic that the UAW president and the head of the companies do a handshake and a photo op. He didn't do that. He threw the contracts in the garbage. He was just doing a live stream in front of a garbage titled "Their Proposals." So, yeah, it's all great right now. I mean, the reality is, I've covered strikes. First few weeks are great. Then the pain sets in. Workers have to pick up extra work on top of picketing. The pressure from your spouse gets more because money's tight. There is a strike fund, so workers get some of their pay. Part of their dues. They're getting some of their pay, but not their full amount. They're not getting all of their health care. And that could be obviously stressful when we're all already, paycheck to paycheck anyway. But I think he's really stressing solidarity, camaraderie. You also have the fact that the Canadian auto workers might go on strike a few days later. That's smaller. It's 18,000 workers. But, you got the bridge from Detroit to Canada. If you have an international auto strike, I mean, that could be huge. And I think it's a domino effect because the auto industry, some other than the mining strikes of the early 20th century, there was the Flint sit-down strike, and some of the biggest actions among labor and strikes have been the auto industry over the last century. So this can really hopefully light a fire under all of our behinds.
Well, let's see what Mr. Fain has to say. We're going to play a quick clip for you guys.
And just, I find it incredibly sexy. Him sitting there and saying that every billionaire is a failed policy, find that incredibly sexy.
Yeah.
So it does it for me.
And it just takes one. The next thing you know, maybe the CWA might follow suit and do the same thing. You never know. So here we go.
This week, we finally begun to see all three companies at least submit something, which is why I wanted to have this update. On Wednesday, we gave Ford a counter proposal to Ford. We gave a counter proposal to Ford, and they in turn responded on Thursday. On Thursday morning, GM gave us a proposal, an insulting proposal, but still a proposal. And finally, this morning, Stellantis gave us their counteroffer. Here's where things stand on our core demands. Under tiers, we need to end the broken system of unjust tiers. We believe in equal pay for equal work, that no worker should be treated like they're second-class citizens. We proposed a 90-day progression to top rate, the restoration of pensions, and post-retirement health care for all. Ford has proposed a 5-year progression, down from the current 8 years, and they rejected all pension and retiree health care proposals. GM proposed a 6-year progression, also rejecting all of our pension and retiree health care proposals. And they want to continue the substandard pay scale for CCA and GMCH workers. Stellantis also wants to keep a 6-year progression to top rate, maintain the tier system by rejecting all pension, retiree health care proposals, and keep the substandard pay with our parts depots. Under wages, in our member demands, we propose significant double-digit pay increases of 40% to match the salary increases of the big three CEOs. To catch up with this brutal inflation and to make up for decades of falling real wages in this industry. Ford has proposed a 10% raise over 4 years with lump sum bonuses that many employees won't be eligible for. GM proposed the same, except members at CCA would only get 2% over 4 years, and GMCH would get no raises. This morning, Stellantis offered 14.5% over 4 years, and for their salaried bargaining unit people, they offered lump sums only. That's what these companies think you're worth. That's what they say about you behind closed doors, meeting with the bargaining committees. And then they go on TV and talk about treating us like family. Tell me, is this how you treat your family? Do you tell your family, good luck living paycheck to paycheck, but I'll keep my $29 million a year? Do you tell your family, go make cars 7 days a week, 90 days in a row, so I can buy a second house in Mexico? That's not how I treat my family. We aren't going to lay down and take whatever scraps they give us. It's time. It's long past time that we stand up. And we're serious about this deadline, and the companies are serious too. Just yesterday, I saw reports of Ford taking out big loans and prepping scabs to work if we go on strike. They're getting ready, so we're getting ready.
I love him. I do. Oh,
I see you sweating a bit. Yeah,
I do. I like him so much. It's very.
Yeah, no, he's got like a combination of Jimmy Hoffa and Teddy Roosevelt going on. It's like this really interesting.
He's just not.
But we're living in an era today where, especially people who were born after 1980, where they don't realize that, Fain is a throwback to the way union leaders used to be. Going back to the days of Teddy Roosevelt all the way through Ronald Reagan. But the moment that the air traffic controllers were fired in the summer of 1981, those types of leaders more or less just disappeared, and they really disappeared under Clinton. Now that somebody like him has come along, it's almost like people don't know how to react to somebody who is saying, walk tall and carry a big stick and always stand with your workers. Right. It is inspiring, to say the least.
Yeah.
I think also, for all the shit he gets, some of it deserved. I think Fain is kind of mirroring Bernie 2016, but he actually has a leverage point behind him. I mean, all Bernie could really do is run a campaign and, threaten the establishment, but he couldn't I guess he could have, tried to organize a general strike. But my point is he didn't have it wasn't like a union thing where he could go on strike and shut down certain sectors of the economy. This guy is talking the Bernie language. Billionaires don't need to exist, this and that, but he's also at the top of a union that the contract's about to end. So it's just kind of that kind of populist militancy, even though Bernie didn't exert his power when he should have as a senator many times. The other thing he's doing, it might seem like a simple thing, but other contracts, like workers weren't getting these charts of how much these companies have made over the last year. The stock buybacks that they were doing, a lot of workers, they knew they were being screwed, but didn't really have the numbers to put to it. I mean, even that small thing that he just did, is that how you treat your family? This works and this excites your workers. And, it would be nice if we lived in an Occupy Wall Street utopia where we didn't need leaders. I think it worked. I think it helps to have a strong leader. And he seems like a strong leader to me. Of course, it remains to be seen how much the follow through is. But at this point, it's unless something magic happens between now and Thursday, they're going to go on strike. It could be a long lasting strike. The media is already starting with the propaganda. This could hurt the economy, which is very tilted towards the workers. Selfishness might hurt the economy, but so be it. I mean, if the economy needs to be hurt to break this fucking economic hellscape, then so be it. These companies have, prepped in terms of, like he said, Ford is taking out a loan. They've upped their supplies, all of them over the last few weeks, but that's only going to take you so far. Laughably, I think it was Ford, is training 1,200 salaried employees, meaning the white collar pencil pushers, to do hard labor. Yeah, that just doesn't work. John Deere tried that, and there were a lot of accidents and injuries with the salaried people trying to drive the fucking forklifts. I think this could go on for a while. And it's different also, not to get so technical, but usually they target one of the big three. This seems to be targeting all of them at once. That's 150,000 workers. Is every single worker going to be out there? No. But even if there's 50,000 workers physically striking in multiple states, that's not something the media could really ignore. And it's also not something, if the Democratic Party is interested in winning, which we're not convinced is the case, not something they could ignore either.
You know,
No. I lost it for a second there anyway. But what would be real? Like, I'm sitting here thinking, like, how to turn something big even bigger. And I'm like, I wonder if he has connected with Shauna Sawant at all and Workers Strike Back, because I feel like there can be a lot of things that are being planned to be in solidarity with UAW when they're on strike. Like, we don't have any place near here where we would actually be able to go, but that doesn't mean that there couldn't be our local unions doing things in solidarity. So I don't know. I was thinking that because
other big unions have come out in support of them, but that's, it's one thing to do it on Twitter. It's another thing to be on the ground. It's another thing to be bringing food. It's another thing, if need be, to be throwing money in if the strike is prolonged. I mean, remember, the coal workers were on strike for over a year in Alabama. To the point where people were getting run over by company workers driving out of the parking lot. So there have been strikes that can go on for a year. I don't expect that in this case. The auto industry is too important, but could it happen for 2 months, 3 months? Maybe.
Yeah. There needs to be a way to create a broader base than just, because when you talk about, even if 50,000 people are out on strike, but what if it's not just auto workers that are out doing that? That's what we need to somehow do that.
Well, it's no different.
And it is connected. I mean, of course, there's Amazon Labor Union that won in Staten Island. They've been, there's been issues and, some fighting internally between Christian Smalls and others in the union. But the Teamsters right now is trying to organize Amazons, which
that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are definitely familiar with how badass the Teamsters are.
Like the Teamsters.
Again, any union that is not going to toe the line for Biden and the Democratic establishment, it's a great sign. And usually that will tell you exactly where people are. And so with that said, what is your plan for later this week?
I'm heading to Detroit. It's also, it's a little tricky because I think there's definitely going to be a strike, but, I want to wait to book my flight.
It could be an Al Capone fault situation for you.
We'll be in Detroit. We'll probably float around a little bit because there's other obviously Michigan has a lot of plants. So start out in Detroit. Ohio has some plants where I know some workers. There's also, like I said, Canada might go on strike. I just reached out to some people at Unifor, which is the union in Canada, to see if they'd be interested in us coming to cover it. I do not know my Canadian geography, so don't particularly know where the plants are in Canada. Within driving distance to Detroit, it would be a couple hours.
I would think Toronto-ish. I would think if you're in that vicinity, you'd be Toronto-ish.
Yeah. But we plan on starting out in Detroit and going from there. I covered the GM strike in Detroit in 2019. And that was just GM, and that was a shit ton of people on the picket line. So, this could be much bigger. So we'll be out there. The contract ends at 11 or midnight Thursday going into Friday. So potentially you could have picket lines starting Friday.
So we need people to help with this because, guys, if you like people covering, actual news, important things that are happening to
No, I don't. I don't care.
Well,
I just want to talk about drama, Jordan.
And Jordan will make it very sexy for y'all.
I'll make it sexy.
All UAW water and Flint water and all of those real Rust Belt issues. He makes them really sexy. So
this will be way sexier than any debate about Biden versus Cornel West. I can promise you that. So
it's statuscoupnews.com, right?
Statuscoup.com/join if you want to support. Guys,
be members if you're not. Guys, be members if you're not. It's important.
We're members. We don't just tell you to do something. We put our money where our mouth is. That's what you got to do.
There's not a lot of people doing reporting.
Actually, there's nobody doing it.
No, well, look, and there's a couple of decent people that do things on an international level, but domestically, it's not great.
I could tell you because I've covered enough of this how it will be. There will be documentary filmmakers there. Oftentimes, shockingly, it's from foreign countries, and foreign news crews often cover American news more than American news. You'll have local media there. They'll be there for a little bit, and then they'll slice it up for 40 seconds on their nightly news. And it will usually be followed up by, some line about how this is hurting the economy, but they will not be going live, telling the stories of the workers, telling the stories of these workers that, have had to work, 14 days in a row, whose backs are literally breaking, who are, having even working full time or having to choose between, groceries or medicine. They're not going to, give the microphone to the workers and really tell the story. And, exciting shit happens on picket lines. You got the cars passing by, honking, giant rats representing the scabs. It's one of my favorite things to cover. So, yeah, if you can, definitely support us.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And not just so much for people to see what, I don't know, just to hear from regular workers as much as be aware of this situation. Most people don't know this exists. Like, they really don't know this exists.
Nope.
They don't know that that's a thing.
No, I mean, if they hear about it, it would really be just short mentions on a CNN, kind of a headline, but not, it will not get the time that, Trump's latest indictment or
and they do
they're covering
the workers essentially for how dare you go on strike and make things inconvenient for us, because now I can't get the car that I want when I want it. And so that's not, so it's always presented from this perspective of those greedy workers, they're just, why are they going on strike and shutting everything down?
Well, hey, the amazing Bill Maher told on himself the other day where he's like, you people, you writers think you're entitled.
He's like, I don't think you're entitled to earn a living.
I got to tell you, I used to love Bill Maher.
Same.
And it's really just horrifying what he's become.
Susan did a good bit about his take on the Writers Guild, which I thought was really good, because it's absurd that he's sitting there projecting it like it's some person living in their mother's basement that writes a script and thinks that they should be owed something. That's not who the Writers Guild of America is, but that's how he references, like, you're not owed a living, as if it's like Wayne and Garth in a basement.
But that's where the whole Bernie Trump phenomenon has made things all the more real in the political arena. They have basically exposed everybody to show their cards. Anybody who was saying for the longest time, oh, I support workers, I support living, I support health, I did that. Well, now you're going to really have to show if that's where you stand.
So they're not owed a living.
No.
Professional workers.
Well, the ironic thing is a lot of his jokes are written by those writers that he's saying are not.
He takes care of his writers. So I don't know what that is, but they're not entitled to earn a living. Okay.
Well, one more thing, another angle that the media is already doing is bringing up electric vehicles. And like trying to make it seem like these companies have been doing the right thing and shifting towards investing more in electric vehicles. And this is going to throw a monkey wrench in that.
Good.
And I'm sorry, it is not the UAW workers' job to save the planet. And, a lot of the workers I've talked to, they do care, but it's not their job to, make sure there is a clean transition. That would be the government's job and the company's job, and the company's making plenty of money. But I am seeing that already in some of the coverage, kind of that angle, like this is really coming at a bad time when these companies are trying to really jack up their investment in electric and clean vehicles.
Which I also, at this point, am sort of thinking that that's also just another capital way to get to sort of profit off of the environmental catastrophe, when in fact it really isn't going to do anything that makes a difference. It just profits people like Elon Musk.
It helps around the edges, but if you want to do something really significant,
it helps
cut the military by 75% and the emissions.
Yeah, but it's like if you're plugging into a grid that is still working off of fossil fuels, which I am here, we plug into the grid. So I have a hybrid, but I love that I only have to fill it up like once a month, because most of my days I get enough on a charge, which that I like. But I don't think I'm saving the planet, because I'm still plugging into a fossil fuel grid. So the only thing is, and I would also say that the people that are abused, the indigenous violations that occur with that what needs to go into doing solar, and go into electric and the batteries and those things, like that's another cost that isn't something that we necessarily measure environmentally, but it's pretty massive. So
the children in the Congo making these batteries
moving with their hands, the cobalt and lithium, right? So to me, that's not a win. And yet, yeah, so maybe it saves a little bit for some grids that are off fossil, maybe, but really all it's doing is profiting the people like Elon Musk that are the middlemen between that technology and the people. That's all it's really doing.
Yep.
You know, we have talked at length about the need to disrupt the system. Obviously, that is the premise of why Dr. Cornel West is running for president right now. We see very often that any movement on the left ends up getting derailed for one reason or another. We'll obviously address what we have learned earlier today, but I think it's very important to focus on the core message of getting outside the two-party system and why the only way that you can create leverage is through the labor movement in conjunction with an outside the two-party system movement. For all the things that Marianne and RFK are doing running in the Democratic primary, they know that it has a safeguard of superdelegates, among other things, to stop it dead in its tracks. But even the concept of Dr. West right now polling consistently at 5% in the Green Party literally has the establishment losing their mind over a year out from the election. And he doesn't even really have a campaign going as of yet. And so it really says a lot.
Given today's news, it's not promising.
Sure. Well, may I?
Sorry.
Yes, we're all very upset about what we heard earlier today, as we should be. But you obviously had a very productive conversation with Dr. West following his conversation with our frenemy, and we'll just leave it at that. But I want people to obviously hear the highlights from this interview, and we will break it down. So here we go.
With all this hand-wringing and meltdowns, you got James Carville on TV saying he's wet in his bed. David Axelrod melting down. Has anyone from the Biden administration, the Democratic Party elite, reached out to you to see, you know, what can we do for you? What kind of policy concessions can we make? Not in 2 years, now. What can we do to further work on poverty or the Black community or the issues that you have championed? It seems if they're so worried, the first thing I would do is try to talk to someone you see as such a threat.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's one of the things we talked about on the Breakfast Club a few weeks ago, right? If they were really concerned about the conditions and issues that I'm talking about, they would speak to those issues and conditions and still have time to do it. Executive order and a whole host of other things. But the problem is that you don't have Socratic energy and democratic sensibility and Democratic Party. So its capacity for self-criticism is an analysis to my capacity to be tackle on National Football League team tomorrow. It just doesn't exist, it seems. It's so frozen, ossified, petrified into its narrow way of looking at the world, and those who do not accept that are demonized, marginalized, character assassination, and so forth, you see. Now, I'm more concerned about a critique of the system than I am being preoccupied with their attacks on me. You know what I mean? Because their attacks on me are minimal compared to what the masses of people have to live with every day. 63% of the population living paycheck to paycheck, unbelievable wealth inequality that we know. I mean, a lobby-free Congress is such an oxymoron at the present moment, given how deeply saturated the lobbyists are in the shaping of public policy. Same would be true with big pharmaceutical companies vis-a-vis policies in regard to public health and so on. But there are two things. One, there's a bully pulpit. As I said before, the social movement would have to be strong enough to keep the pressure on me as well as Congress to give me some room to maneuver, even as I'm a part of that social movement. And the second one would be, I would be robust in terms of the use of executive order, given the deep entrenched interests which are at work in Congress. And they could charge me with, unconstitutional. I'm not going to go beyond the Constitution in any ugly way, but even the Constitution itself oftentimes has been shaped by corporate interests. And I say, no, if I think the people's interest is actually being crushed, I'm going to stand up for that, and let's take it to court. I'm not going to be overthrowing all of the laws and all the courts, but let's take it to court. Let us reveal how the criminal justice system and the court system itself has been a rationalization of the rule of corporate power vis-a-vis working and poor people.
I love him. I do. Dr. West, if only you knew how much I loved you, you'd be more motivated to come on our
Jordan,
show.
just sent him an email saying that Jen would really like to talk to him.
I need to compensate for when I met him the first time, which he doesn't remember, but I was an idiot. But then I think of, he goes on people's shows that just are not worthy of him. And I understand it makes sense for numbers. I get it. But it's like, you know, he really needs to talk to people that really respect him. That's what I think, because he is on the mission. Everything he says, like, I totally get why he's doing what he's doing and the way he's doing it. And I feel like on some microcosm, that's what I did. And so I totally get what he's doing and what he's about. And he's the man.
Yeah, I think he's running. I mean, I can't speak for him, but I think he's running to create a movement that could go past this election cycle. Because there's been, you know, a lot of candidates that kind of created a movement like Bernie, but then left that movement kind of on the lawn, you know, and didn't just let it die on the vine. And I think what he's trying to do, I mean, I don't think he's naive. I don't think he thinks there's a strong chance of him becoming president. Crazier things have happened. But I think he's trying to significantly move us forward, make progress in terms of building a third party, get people who are right now out of the picture, not non-voters, which is the biggest voting bloc there in America, and get them to participate again, and then take that structure and make it go forward for years to come. And I think what he's doing is very important. I also think that I was encouraged that he said I would be very robust in terms of using executive action. That's actually one of the mistakes I think Marianne Williamson made when she entered. I agree with a lot of her policies. You know, she talks a lot about FDR and a new Bill of Rights. I agree with that. But I think practically when you're running in a primary that's not really a primary, you need to kind of have 5 bullet points that people could get. And I think she should have came day one. These are the executive actions that I would take that President Biden has refused to. I think Cornel should also do that. He's saying he will do it.
He has said some. I mean, he's already said like people he would pardon. He has said like that, you know, things that he would. I mean, he has said some. I think he.
But I'm talking about like declare a climate emergency.
Like, yeah.
Enact, you know, this clause to expand Medicare, which would be Medicare for all. And yada, yada, you know, so I would lead forward with that. But I think what he's doing is great. I'm not telling people who to support, but at this point, listen, we can't be naive. This whole prism, this whole dynamic of we're with you on a third party, but this election is too dangerous. This Republican is too dangerous. Not this time. Right. I mean, that's never going to change. If it's not this time, it will be next time. If it's, God forbid, Marjorie Taylor Greene or the lunatic South Dakota governor or name your extremist Republican. I don't really think we're going back to like the Bob Dole era of Republicanism or even the Mitt Romney era. We're going to have this Trumpist in a teapot kind of, you know, for lack of a better word, nationalist, extremist Republican Party. And there's going to be really dangerous candidates for years to come. So the answer can't be grin and bear it and just vote for, you know, the slowly being poisoned rather than being shot in the face. You just can't operate that way. And this is coming from somebody who voted for Biden in 2020 because I was seeing out on the road. I was covering Trump rallies and it was just a lot darker than 2016, which I also covered. It seemed like I was at these rallies that like if I was living in the 1930s, it had tinges of it. You know, it was very authoritarian. I saw like white militiamen all over the place. Trump, I don't think he was really joking about serving more than 2 terms. So this isn't like a minimization that Trump is dangerous, but we've had 1 term of Biden and we've had a lot of dangerous things from Biden. Assange, what's going on in Cop City right now, he's not doing anything to stop it. He's backdoor trying to privatize Medicare. I mean, I could go on. There's a lot of terrible things. So
breaking the railroad
The
strike.
railroad strike, the
Yeah.
Willow Project, the Mountain Valley Pipeline, Ukraine. I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot.
And this is where people who will remain unnamed coming out saying he's exceeded my expectations. He's been better on labor. He has done the worst thing to labor since Reagan broke the air traffic controller strike. That the worst thing. And this is looking at all of the things that Trump did, Bush did, Clinton did, Obama did, George H.W. Bush did. It was really freaking bad. And what ultimately comes as a result of breaking the railroad strike, and why what UAW doing right now is so earth-shatteringly significant. Because you would think that doing something like that would set this movement back so far that people would be so afraid to stand out in the streets. You've got WGA and you have SAG-AFTRA working in conjunction at the strike. And shout out to friend of both shows, Frances Fisher, who is a badass, if there ever was
She
one,
really is.
who is just out there every freaking day getting everybody involved.
She's feisty.
Yeah, very feisty.
was also at at Standing Rock, we should say.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, she's the real deal, and that's where it is inspiring to people. But you don't get any of that inspiration from Joe. And at a time where economic extremism of the worst kind, the anxiety that people are living with every day, not being able to pay their bills.
Bidenomics is going to fix that.
Bidenomics will fix that in about 50 years, but you've got to just be patient, and you might get lucky.
I also think there's kind of the propaganda they created is now biting them in the ass. Because remember, in 2020, we were fed nonstop by the Democratic Party, their sycophants in the media, was this is the pragmatic choice. This is the guy who could get Republicans to the table. This is the guy that could get, all the different factions of the Democratic Party to the table. Well, he basically hasn't been able to do anything other than, bipartisan privatization. That was the infrastructure deal. And the IRA, which was really just crumbs. I mean, tax credits for clean energy would have been nice 15 years ago. That's nothing now. So I think he can't get anything done. Whatever the reason, age, or just doesn't want to ruffle the donors, he couldn't even go at Manchin or Sinema. So why would you want a weak president who's not willing to use the bully pulpit against extremist Republicans? I mean, Trump right now in the polls is doing better than he was in 2019 or 2020. Trump was down in most of the polls against Biden. Now he's up. And I think Wisconsin in particular, it could flip back to Trump. Biden won it by 20,000 votes. That's nothing. Wisconsin has been tilting a little more red. Biden only won Pennsylvania by 80,000 votes. That's not like a monumental margin. Michigan remains to be seen. Georgia, frankly, don't go blaming Cornel West when Biden loses Georgia, because right now the key to Biden losing Georgia might be Atlanta, because they're cutting down a fucking forest to put in a militarized police compound. You can say, well, that's not Biden doing it. Well, it's a Democratic mayor, a Democratic city council, and these two Democrats that you said we had to elect to give Democrats the Senate, right, Warnock and Ossoff, are silent as a mouse. I mean, they killed a protester. The cops killed Tortuguita. They're arresting nonviolent protesters who, for the crime of having flares or running from cops, I would, in many cases, run from them too. And they're charging them with domestic terrorism. You know who else got charged with domestic terrorism? Timothy McVeigh. And they're charging nonviolent protests. So this is fascist. There's a debate about what's fascist and what not. This is fascist. Biden could put a stop to it. He's not. So yeah, I think that long-winded montage of mine, I think what Cornel West is doing is good. It's now just a matter of what can he do beyond interviews. The interviews are good, but that's not a campaign. So you got to get out there and yeah.
But unfortunately, again, not naming names, we both feel that the decision that was made today is not the right one. This is coming from people who I know that really know these particular individuals and their involvement in campaigns and how they are considered to be saboteurs, if you will, and not applying money properly. And all I keep wondering is how, first of all, how do they keep getting hired? Who thinks that this is a great idea, even though clearly you think that some of these people would be getting vetted to make sure that they are not making a mistake? Again, it's one thing to make commentary online that is favorable to, let's say, the populist left movement. It's another thing entirely to look at the track record of basically getting paid a lot of money, and your track record is that of a failure, a complete failure, and it only reinforces the notion of what goes on, not just in the Democratic Party, but in left politics in general. You can be a 10-time loser and have collected tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees and still get hired. I don't get it.
Wait, I'm sorry, Jordan. I just don't understand how you can be a third party trying to be somewhat revolutionary and you hire somebody that was affiliated with Hillary Clinton.
You know, to me, I think to me, I honestly, I don't know. I know Peter Daou and what he was back in the day. I will give him the benefit of the doubt that he's had an evolution and has now sees the light. But with that said, to me, the issue for me is not necessarily Peter Daou. I don't really think it's the right choice. To me, if you are going to make real progress, get past 5%. I don't think the bar should be 5%. I think you should be shooting for more than 5%. You're really going to have to run a non-traditional campaign. And what I mean by that is I think Cornel West has a real opportunity to reach non-voters, because a lot of non-voters are, poor Black people, poor Hispanic people, indigenous people, poor white people, just poor people. And who's the only person talking about poverty? Cornel West. Who's the person traveling to Mississippi, a gazillion times? And I think that message can work. And I think you really need somebody who has experience in, I know it became a dirty word because of Obama, but like actual community organizing, not just like being a manager, but how to organize communities, because you're going to have to go into, areas that don't have, a strong record of voting. You're going to have to go into areas that have been left behind. That doesn't mean you're not going to target, he said he wants to, Cornel said he wants to go to Trump country. I think he could try to target some religious voters because he kind of talks in religious tones. But to me, the biggest opportunity is getting non-voters, immigrants. Bernie did a good job in Iowa in 2020. His campaign did these satellite caucuses, and they got in Iowa, Somali Americans and Muslim Americans. And that's part of how he won Iowa. He did win Iowa. Sorry, Pete. So I think you need somebody who really knows how to actually organize. I don't really know if Peter, he's worked in politics, but that's not organizing. And even if you want to give him the benefit of the doubt, I don't think he's just tweeting for the last 6 months to a year that he's seen the light. I don't think he's faking it, but I don't really know if you've had a lifer in politics, I don't know if that's the right person to run a non-traditional campaign of what I'm describing.
Yeah, I reached out a while ago to the contact that I thought that I had at that campaign, and I offered to help in terms of setting up a strategy to do service-based campaign around the country, because I think that's what they need to do. I think they need to, between college campuses and doing something like Bernie's Barnstormers, but you then need to turn that around and create like a service corps that's going into the communities and talking with people and helping people. That creates your organization that will outlast your campaign. That's how you create a community movement. And I reached out. I said that, I suggested it. I'm so happy to come and help set that up, like how we sort of did that here. And I can't get a response. So all I can say is I'm trying to put out this, because I can see what needs to happen almost in my head. And the idea of going along some traditional partisan type path, like I call them the WCCC now. It's the white collar campaign carnies. And, these guys are just not with solving the problem. They're just about collecting a paycheck. So I just think that if you're going to go that road, it's not going to yield any different results than we've seen in the past.
And there's also this huge problem with people not recognizing where the real strength comes from. It's almost like if you are in Dr. West's shoes, because of his disposition and how he articulates himself, the type of person he needs running his campaign is like a Sean Fain. You need that type of barnstorming leader, take no prisoners, organizing figure that can really get people going. It's almost like the yin and the yang type of thing, and that isn't what's happening here. Jen is often saying,
I mean, I don't think Cornel needs somebody to tell him this. He said he plans on it. But if I were his campaign right now, numero one would be, we need to be on the front lines at this UAW strike. And we need to be at other strikes. And we need to be part of other union actions because the media can't resist covering him. So they will cover him. They'll probably, spin it. But bottom line, that's where the energy's at outside of and I don't know if that's a fact. You're not the first person I've heard that from, Jen, that they reached out. How do they get involved volunteering or, get involved, period? And they didn't hear back. I think for a while they're just
fine. That's not a good sign. When somebody reaches out and says, I have some really good ideas, I'd like to share, I'd like to help, I would at least think it's worthy of a response.
Yeah. And then of course, the worst part is that this decision could not have been made at a worse time because of the interview that just happened at the end of last week. And this whole big divisive crap that usually starts from one person. And then it becomes this whole, see, I told you so. And I cannot wait to hear.
Help.
It's not going to help because he's going to put a video out there basically saying, you see, I was right about Dr. West. You should all listen to me because I know everything there is to know about politics. In fact, I should be the one running. I'm just too damn lazy to get off my ass. So I want everyone else to just follow me and do what I say. And so now,
are you talking about a particular figure?
Well, I am. I'm stuck in the same
But the one thing is, statistically speaking, given the way that the WCCC works, he won't be there for very long. So they'll rotate him out and someone else will come in because that's what seems to keep happening. It's sort of like because they just can't, they're not winning. Also,
again, I don't know Peter Daou, so I don't want to slam him, but something doesn't smell right to me when you say you left Marianne Williamson's campaign for family reasons. I don't remember what he said, but he said he left for personal reasons, not because of her, but then you're Cornel West campaign manager. So, I mean, let's not, obviously a lot of people have left Marianne Williamson's campaign. That's not a secret.
And yet I have a friend that just walked off Cornel's campaign because they brought on Peter Daou.
Right. So, just something, I'm not saying he lied, but there is something going on here where
something doesn't smell right. It's how is it? This is why people are always. This is why you get listen, we are friendly with some of those libertarian fringe individuals who think that the FBI and CIA is literally at every corner. Like there's infiltration that's going on everywhere. It's like lizard people. It's like everyone thinks that there's something. This doesn't make any sense. Something's wrong. And yet, when something like this happens, you really have to scratch your head and think of the millions of people in the country, and there's only a handful of presidential campaigns going on right now. Somehow, a person who walks off of one campaign is the same person that gets hired to walk onto this campaign.
Right. I will say this in fairness, and I don't have any intel, but this is just my thought. In fairness, they might have been shopping for other people, and those other people knew if they would have run Cornel West's campaign, that would be the end of their political career, in the Democratic Party or in the two-party duopoly, that they'd never be hired again. So they could have been targeting other people who are skilled. There are people from Bernie's campaign who were good. A lot of people criticize Bernie's campaign, and there are people to criticize, but Bernie made the ultimate decisions. He got good advice from his campaign that he just wouldn't take. So there are people like I would have recommended to West if he was asking, hey, reach out to this person who was atop Bernie's campaign. So that might have happened, and those people might have said no just because they know career-wise there would be no turning back, and they'd be shunned from other jobs. But at the end of the day, listen, I'll repeat it. I don't know how somebody who's been a 20-year lifer or whatever it is in traditional politics, all the way from fucking Hillary and Bill and that club to, down with the two-party duopoly. I don't really know what creative outside the box thoughts. I will say from people that I did speak with on Marianne Williamson's campaign, they didn't have any negative things to say about him. They said he did a good job, and it was more Marianne that's just a control freak and, that. So at least for her campaign, there wasn't much negative I heard about Daou there. But again, I just think you need somebody who is an organizer, not a longtime consultant.
I agree. I think that without question, if you're going to do it, you got to do it differently. This cannot be done traditionally because, like you said, the consultant class, if you will, and look, don't hate the player, hate the game, as they say. Daou was making his money one way, 6-7 years ago for a lengthy period of time. He clearly saw an opportunity that he thought was going to be more lucrative long term, and clearly it's been working for him because he's been hired by about a half a dozen people in the last few years. So whatever he is doing, it is working. And some people
that doesn't mean he's winning.
That's true. But then again, the left generally doesn't win because
you keep hiring people that don't win.
The cohesiveness that needs to be had within this movement, it isn't making any sense. And that's the thing that I'm concerned about. That's the thing that was concerning about what happened last week with who and Dr. West. And so as a result, you realize that the division, there's such a lack of cohesion in the movement right now. And what you're doing, your work, which is so significant because it isn't sexy. And I will remind people that even if you disagree with Crystal Ball and her position when it comes to Biden and Dr. West, be it as it may, Crystal always platforms Jordan and Status Coup and the work that they are doing and gets it out there to as many people as possible. Even if you don't agree with her position, agree with getting out the message about labor in this country. Because right now, that's one of the only bright, shining objects that we have. And if we are going to disagree on that front, fair enough. But throwing out the baby with the bathwater because you disagree on this particular...
That's what it's become.
That's
what it's become. It's become you're canceled if you don't agree or you take a position that I am viscerally against. I mean, I saw the debate, Crystal and Kyle had with Brianna. I actually, on the merits, if you care about policy, he wasn't wrong that there have been some policies that we would have not expected to be. I think where I differ from him, Kyle, is that doesn't really exceed my bar by a lot. I wanted more because the times call for more. Particularly, he ran on a $15 minimum wage and unilaterally surrendered. I mean, we could go down the list of things. So the idea of, well, I didn't expect anything, so getting I don't think that really makes the people, rationing insulin or working 3 jobs. Right. But I think where I part from a lot of the just chatter on Twitter and elsewhere is I don't ascribe like he's a bastard, and like he's canceled or her, or they are who I told you they are, I don't agree, but I don't hate them. They're not like, let's throw them off Progressive Island. I really think there's way too much of that. I didn't agree with Brianna on a lot of points she made. But I don't say cancel to her. So I just think it's become, and I get it, people are hurting. And when you're hurting, emotions get high. For a lot of people watching that debate, the situation is urgent. And Crystal's thing about the National Labor Relations Board being stronger doesn't help them now. So I get why people are turned off by their argument. What I think is we have to stop this ascribing bad motivations to people if we don't agree with them, or they don't share our values, or they don't get it. No, they just disagree. And I think if the standard is gonna be we on the left have to be in lockstep about all things, then we'll just perennially eat each other alive. And be a minority, because the Republican Party is a well-oiled machine. Doesn't really matter if they agree or not. They get in lockstep when it matters. Democratic Party, when it wants to be, is a well-oiled machine. The left is what we've been seeing, which is, fights and debates that turn into cancellation death matches.
At some point, you just got to rip off the damn Band-Aid. that's the way it's going to be. Eventually, you're just going to have to face reality that the people that have driven this, country into the gaping ditch that we're in right now are not the ones that are going to pull us out. The ones that allowed us to thrive at one time or another, which was a populist left and to a degree populist right movement through labor, is the only way we will combat a country. Just the fact that you have representatives in this country, that Nancy Pelosi is running for her 20th election, the fact that insider trading is legal, the fact that stock buybacks are legal. We are going straight to hell in a handbasket, and the only way we're not going there, because there's not going to be this collective uprising of people in power who benefit from this broken system. We're just going to say, that's enough. I think we'll change our course now and serve the people. It's going to take the people uniting together, coalescing collectively in solidarity together. And whether that starts with what UAW is preparing to do in 3 days or not is going to have a lot to do, much as the conversation we're going to have with Attorney Franklin, who is going to talk about what's going on in Cop City. These things are essential to that change. So with that said, the floor is yours. Let everybody know what your plan is for this week. Remember to go over to statuscoup.com/join if you haven't done it already.
Guys, support Status Coup so Jordan can do reporting on the ground.
Yeah, he needs bread.
Absolutely.
And we want to make sure he gets that bread. So floor is yours.
Yes. Well, unless there's a radical change where they strike a deal, which, I'd love to cover a strike, but if they get a good deal, that would be good as well. But I don't anticipate that happening. So we should be in Detroit Thursday, and the strike should start Friday. So we'll be in Detroit, zigzag around a little bit, because obviously there's plenty of plants and plenty of picket lines that will be going on in Michigan. Might go to Ohio as well. Might take some planning, but we might cross the bridge into Canada. If auto workers in Canada go on strike, their contract ends a few days later. So it's expensive, myself, a cameraman, flights, hotels, rent a car, food. I'll be there for about a week. If the strike is continuing, we plan on replacing me with Lewis, my colleague. So overall, we might be there for 2 weeks. And I think it's really important, honestly, because like I said, usually with these things, you get some local news crews that do a 20-second, 30-second wrap up in their local nightly newscast, but it's not a thorough reporting job. You get the national media that maybe do a segment, usually from the propaganda angle of these workers are, hurting the economy and these greedy workers. You don't get a lot of independent outlets that speak to the workers unedited and really push and give their message and give them the microphone. So if you can, you can support us for $5 a month, statuscoup.com/join. If you can't, make sure you subscribe to our channel on YouTube. And thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for telling us all the information you get. That's awesome.
Appreciate it, brother. Have safe travels to Detroit. Keep us posted. We'll be tuning in. Guys, make sure you're subscribed to Status Coup and also go to statuscoup.com/join. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
All right. Take care.
All right, guys. So we have another guest tonight.
We do. Getting back
exciting.
to old school generational
Well,
change.
we used to do, during campaign season, we would have like a short guest for a candidate, and then we would have like a long guest. But we're having 2 guests tonight. So as we've talked about, we've covered the Cop City situation several times on this show. This is one of those things that I think is very important. Like, this is sort of, I was just thinking, to me, it's sort of up there with like my stand on Assange. Like, this is one of those things that we just can't let happen. Like, we just can't allow this. So I've been following this closely, and our guest tonight is Devin Franklin. He's an attorney with the Southern Center for Human Rights, and I saw him, I don't even remember which show I watched. I don't even remember which interview. But this is the gentleman who is coordinating defense counsel for the defenders, for the activists that have been indicted under those absurd RICO charges in Georgia. We've talked about that too. But anyway, so we're going to get some more information about those charges, because I find it fascinating that people donating $10 to a bail fund are somehow involved in money laundering. So we're going to get to the bottom of that.
Devin Franklin, welcome to Generational Change.
Good evening. How are you all doing?
Audio's
not great.
Little chippy.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Try again.
Is it better now if I lean in a bit, or?
It's better if you lean into it.
Okay.
That is-
What do you want to do?
Yeah, I can hear you all just fine.
Okay, then that's fine. So I don't remember what interview I saw you on. I was so pleased to see, though, that there is an organization that is working to put together defense for these people. But could you start out talking about where you got involved in the whole process with it when these people got? I mean, were you involved prior to the RICO charges, or how did that happen? And like, just give us a general lay of what these charges are. That I think it's 62 people.
61.
61. Okay. So yeah, tell us a little bit about the charges and what they're facing in Georgia.
Yeah, so I guess the best place to begin is just kind of knowing what my organization is and what we do. So I work for the Southern Center for Human Rights. My position is Movement Policy Counsel, which means I am essentially a lawyer that does policy work and movement work and those things that are involved in the intersection of those two lanes. Before that, I was a public defender in Fulton County, Georgia, and so I'm very familiar with the system, a number of the DAs, and just the culture in general there. But to go back, my firm, we're a nonprofit law firm, and we work and do work around these spaces of death penalty abolition, decriminalization of poverty, and ensuring that there are some limits, trying to end mass incarceration, generally speaking. And so as it pertains to this movement, a lot of the work that we had done before was related to the earlier protests and when people would get arrested, making sure that they had attorneys for bond hearings. So we were...
Devin, I don't mean to cut you off, but it really is coming in chippy and staticky. Is there a way you might be able to log in on your cell phone? Is that something
Can you do it from your phone?
I can try.
Let's
Okay,
see how that
awesome.
goes.
Let's give that a try.
Yeah, and see how that goes.
We'll probably have better luck.
Yeah,
in
guys,
terms
but
of connection
this is important, and you guys can definitely go back and look at some of the other shows we've done covering what's going on in Cop City. But the people that have been indicted under RICO charges, it's essentially calling this completely just coalition of different groups, different people, like that it's this organized criminal venture. And for people who don't understand, and this is Georgia RICO, but I'm assuming it's the same concept as federal RICO. And this is laws that are designed for mafia and organized crime. It's to go after crime syndicates. That's what the RICO laws are meant to do. And so the idea that this is being used on activists and defenders of, it's very fascist and very authoritarian and very scary.
I think a lot of people are also afraid to admit the realities of what that's all about when it comes to giving up liberty for security.
It's not
police perceived anyway.
Yeah.
So let's try again.
How's that?
How is it now?
Much better.
Much better.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm in Philadelphia for some other work, so I'm relying on my hotel internet connection. So
no, it's all good. This is much better. So just talk about I was just sort of giving like a background about like what RICO is in general, but talk a bit about why this case is so I have not recalled this ever happening before like this.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of any particular times where the legal process has been used in such a weaponized fashion to essentially chill the expression of First Amendment rights. I'm certain that it's happened in some regard. We know that the police state oftentimes brings their presence to intimidate those in the exercise of First Amendment rights. Even with the Stop Cop City movement, they would wear the baklavas, the full skull face mask.
Right.
They would show up at people's at events and just kind of post up with the big military vans and those kind of things to suppress the exercise of First Amendment rights. But I'm not sure if there has ever been such a deliberately concerted effort to criminalize so many aspects of movement. I fear that it is not the last time. I fear that this is essentially a test run. I know that in the state of Georgia, generally speaking, where it hasn't been used for against movement per se, we have generally seen a expansive use of the RICO statute across the state of Georgia. It goes back most prominently to the prosecution of a number of Atlanta public school teachers who were accused of engaging in a cheating scandal for profit, although none of them made any, real money off of it. We most recently heard, well, not most recently, the next big use was when it was brought against, rapper Young Thug and his label, and the accusation that it's not a label, it's a gang. And, in order to bring in, a lot of evidence that otherwise is not admissible in court, they crafted an indictment that allowed them to tell a larger narrative of badness as opposed to an actual narrative of guilt. And then, of course, we've seen it used against the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. So I think what we can see is that because of the diversity of tactics, that it really is, or it's something they desire to be, a really flexible tool in the hands of prosecutors who, and state agents in general, who see movement or anything as something that they just want to attack.
Yeah, I feel like this is definitely a foreshadowing. I think both the building of this facility and the way that they're using all of these different means to subvert voices and activists, it's very scary. And I feel like this is one of those lines in the sand that we cannot have this. Like, this is not okay. So I am bar licensed in Florida. Can I help?
Yeah, so what we are doing, and I can send you the link so you can include it in the chat or anywhere for anyone else. What we're doing is, anyone who's interested, we are looking for people who may not be able to practice in the state of Georgia, but who may have the ability and capacity to perform some research.
Okay, that's me.
All right. Well, we would love to have you. we are recruiting those who are licensed in the state of Georgia to assist in the direct representation of the 61 accused persons. And of course, we need to figure out, this is a really involved case. It's probably going to be a long one should it go to trial, which we fully expect that it will. And representation isn't free. And so we're trying to, find ways to secure funds to pay for lawyers. And I think we can provide a link for that as well.
Yeah, please. And I was going to ask you if and I don't know anything about the Georgia State Bar, but I know that some bars, like when I was in Texas, there were different funds and different things that sometimes different groups would be able to tap into, and also to be able to get volunteers through the Bar Association. I don't know if that's something that Georgia has anything like that.
Yes, I know that we do have, like most states, an ability for outside foreign attorneys to pro hac vice in and work collaboratively with local counsel, which is a possibility that we are aware of. Essentially, at this point in time, we are not we're not taking anything off the table. We are, availing ourselves to any and every opportunity to assess those who can help in a legal fight. And of course, we'll do the necessary vetting and questioning to make sure that, we have individuals who are capable, but also, willing to assist in the, legal ways. And we're really just kind of not necessarily in the planning stages, but definitely in the formulation of intentions and making sure that we move deliberately, because we know that the opponent is doing so as well.
Yeah, and where is this right now in the process? Where are because the other issue is, from my understanding, that the jail that we're talking about is particularly egregious. Although I say that like as if there's jails that aren't egregious, right? Like, that's just stupid. But so that and these are people that I know people would like to assume that activists are criminals, but that's not the case. So like, where are they right now in the process in terms of their rights being taken from them?
Yeah, so I've not had any conversations directly with anyone from the Attorney General's office. I do understand that, he may be reaching out to current representatives of those who have been indicted. So just so that people know, and I got cut off on this part before, the people that were arrested, were indicted rather, had previously been arrested on other charges. And so essentially what we see is that those charges, the ones that are like extremely lesser, such as, I think there are a few that have criminal trespass or property damage charges.
Right.
Those are used as predicate facts that support the underlying RICO allegation. And you have others that had previously been charged with money laundering or domestic terrorism, and we see that those persons have been included in the indictment as well with substantive charges. But what we're seeing is that people who have been previously arrested are being indicted for the activity that they were accused of before, in addition to the RICO charge.
Okay.
So where we are is understanding that the AG is reaching out to perhaps negotiate bonds. I don't have any details that I can share about that at this point in time. Yeah. But we're hopeful that the majority of these folks, we're hopeful that every one of these folks, honestly, is able to engage in the surrender process in the same way that President Trump and his several co-defendants were allowed to engage in.
Well, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice?
I'm a big believer in what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And especially when you have so many people who have been out and present and have not, violated bond conditions, I think it only makes sense that they continue to be able to fight their case with their freedom on their side.
I think it's really interesting to be very clear. From my understanding, the only person that has been killed in this entire thing was one of the activists, and it's Tortuga,
Manuel Paez.
Right, that's the only person that's been killed. So the fact that the people that did the killing are accusing the people that are being shot at as being the terrorists, being domestic terrorists, is very interesting to me, because the only people that seem to be doing terrorizing is the law enforcement.
Yeah, and it's really interesting in that, the entire narrative that the state has attempted to engage in since, essentially day one, is that the movement is a violent movement, which has categorically been false.
Yeah.
To the extent that there are things that, some folks in society may not agree with, the things that have occurred have been allegations of property damage. And I'm a very firm believer that property damage is not violence. Violence is violence. And, when Tortuguita was murdered in the forest and shot with their legs crossed and their hands up, and we have reports that state that there was no gunshot residue on their hands, I think that those are the acts of violence that actually need to be talked about, and not those things that the state chooses to manufacture to advance narratives that allow them to justify or attempt to justify the mistreatment and over-prosecution of movement people and activists.
Yeah, I wish I had a picture of the kid. I mean, he just looks like a kid to me, and I'm thinking it's like, these are tree-hugging hippie people. These are people that are trying to save the forest.
No, they're Antifa.
And
they're
no,
Antifa.
and I could almost cry. And the fact that this kid, and to me he's a kid, I'm sorry, but the fact that
the propaganda is just so.
But all you have to do is look at the autopsy report on what happened to him, and it is extremely clear that he was executed.
Yeah.
And I don't like is there anybody even talking about any sort of prosecution for that, or is that just order of doing business?
I've not heard anything of the ilk suggesting that those persons who killed Tortuguita will be held legally accountable. And based on all the narrative things that we've heard, everything suggests that the state is going about this in a manner that suggests that it was a justified killing, which I categorically disagree with.
And that's putting it extremely politely. Because,
his legs were crossed and his hands were up.
Well,
yeah.
I think the big problem here, of course, is that the elected officials, and this is where the whole dichotomy between, red and blue politics just completely gets exposed for the hypocrisy that it is, because when push comes to shove, when it ultimately comes down to capital, that's when you know that they're two sides of the same bird. And in this case, the Democratic Party is dominant in Atlanta. Dominant. And so the idea that the mayor, the congressional representatives, and the 2 U.S. senators have decided to basically go the way of Governor Kemp, you cannot distinguish between any of them. Tells me all I need to know about where this country is right now and where the distractions lie and where the real issues matter. Because we do not have, as Jen, as you've often said, you know, the fact that we have a for-profit corrections system in this country is tantamount to why there is a cop city. It isn't about protecting anybody. It's no different than the military-industrial complex on the domestic side. There is a lot of money to be had, and they're going to keep doing what they're doing because the people of this country are like, they're asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, well, I feel like I'm just not going to have it. So my understanding, Devin, is that I heard something from a journalist somewhere that's covering Cop City that there is some sort of action being planned for November. I don't know if you know anything about that.
Yeah, in terms of things that are planned in the future, I'm not directly involved in the planning of direct actions. From time to time we'll hear about those things, but at this point in time, I don't have any details to offer about when it may happen or what it may entail.
So what's the key argument? Like when you're looking at this, and I know just from looking at this, that this was never the intent of RICO. This is off the wall how this is being used. And do they even have like anything that looks like a legitimate organized enterprise to be pointing at?
Quite clearly not. It's one of the, aside from the seriousness that is entailed in the consequences that potentially face those who are accused, I would almost call the indictment funny. It is laughable in the truest sense of the word for anyone who has ever put themselves through the excruciating pain that is law school and then took the bar. Neither were pleasurable experiences, and I could not imagine having put myself through those things to craft a document such as this, where you allege that the most mundane and basic of activities are indicative of some ominous conspiracy theory to do what exactly, I don't know. The language they use, I think, is to say that they're trying to intimidate people to force change. But it's really curious to me that, you know, the overarching tone and action of this movement has been one that has coalesced to engage in activity in the manner which government officials and so-called decent people would ask that citizens who are feeling discontent wish to would be engaged in. You know, they say that you need to stand up and vote. They say that you need to call a council person, call a congressman. They tell you to protest peacefully, and that you will be heard. But I've been a very ardent supporter of the concept that they are encouraging peaceful engagement, not because they believe in the tenets and principles of it, as Dr. King did, but because, you know, that type of protest is oftentimes easier to ignore. And at those point in times when the movement has been anything other than purely peaceful, such as when, you know, property was allegedly damaged in response to Tortuguita's murder, I think that, you know, we get to a point of disingenuousness from those in power. And in terms of like the concept of an actual organization, you know, I don't even know where to begin. They're trying to take the name of a Twitter account and entitle it as if it were the Gambino crime family. And I know that Georgia's RICO statute is, you know, written a really broad way that allows for entities that are not formal bodies. So it doesn't have to be you know, an LLC, or it doesn't have to be
Right.
A gang that calls themselves anything. It's really broadly written in a way that, allows for them to infer what a group is. But even under the broadest constructions of that statute, as the kids say, the math ain't mathing. It still doesn't make sense that they are saying that because this account tweeted something about this, then that means that people were acting in some kind of coordinated effort to commit crime or racketeering.
Yeah. Make no mistake, this is a violation of the First Amendment. This is a violation of the First Amendment. There is no way around this. These people have tried to very peacefully. They've been dealing with this for a couple of years there. It's not like this is some new thing. So it started out very, very peaceful. It's probably always been peaceful on their end. And then they've tried doing it through the policy process. They're sitting there getting stopped while they're trying to do that. Well, eventually people are going to break. That's just what's going to happen. I mean, you can't do it peacefully. You can't do it legislatively. What is it you're supposed to do? I really, and that's why when we see things where it's going to get more and more violent, and it's like you're not leaving people with options. I mean, this is nonviolent, and yet now they're coming at it as far as I'm concerned with violence. So now that's just pushing it further.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that point up in terms of like the timing of everything, in that part of the indictment speaks towards the alleged organization coming into existence prior to there actually being a substantive Stop Cop City movement. The movement, the actions that led, the government actions that led to the formal proposal of the training facility took place, post George Floyd, post the 2020 uprisings. Yet somehow the state is trying to allege that the beginnings of the Defend the Atlanta Forest enterprise, somehow that it was an organization that was against against Cop City before there was a Cop City.
Are they trying to connect it to like Black Lives Matter and almost like discredit it, from sort of affiliating it like that?
That's certainly the inference, but I think the larger thing that I see from that is, again, this larger concept of criminalizing movement. What they are effectively saying is, any and every time that you come out here and make us look bad by telling us that you don't like what we're doing, and when we smile in your face and don't listen to you after 17 hours of public comment and choose to vote 15 minutes after having heard all those things, and we, when we hear that we've been lied to about the cost of the facility, when we've been told for years that it was going to be $30 million, and then we learned that the cost more than doubled to $67 million. And when you want to hold us accountable for going forward with poor legislation in that manner, we're going to punish you because we don't want to look bad. That is what this indictment is saying. And, as we said,
retribution. It's retribution.
Yeah. Retribution is a perfect word.
This is a violation of the First Amendment. Any way they look at it, I am just this. I feel like this cannot stand. Like this just cannot stand. I'm outraged for these people.
Devin, how can people get involved if they want to assist your efforts? And then obviously you and Jen will connect. Anybody who would like to assist and aid in any capacity, please share with us.
Yeah, where can people sign up to help you?
Yeah, so if people have questions or concerns or things that they can offer, you can send us an email at bridge, BRIDGE, at schr.org. So that's bridge at schr.org. We have a special email account set up for people who have inquiries in terms of how they can contribute to the movement and the defense of these indicted persons. And we, I oftentimes share things from my personal account, brother-in-law ATL on Twitter. It will forever be Twitter. I would never call it X.
Agreed.
Take a stand, man. Yeah. Gotta take a stand.
Gotta take a stand. And additionally, you could follow my organization on on Twitter, Southern Center for Human Rights.
And guys, you know what? If you aren't familiar with organizations like this, they're really important. I mean, not just the Cop City issue, but just generally in dealing with the complete disparate, unequal criminal justice system in general. And as somebody who has been like, I wouldn't say I'm like lifelong abolitionist minded, but I've always been anti-capital punishment. And so these types of organizations are doing the work that needs to be done. So guys, try to support
Absolutely.
those groups.
Devin, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you
on
so
this
much.
evening. This really means a lot. And obviously, and thank you for what you're doing. I mean, I know it goes without saying that, you know, everyone has the right to counsel, but there's a lot of people who don't want to touch this case.
And you know, because when you sit through law school and you learn that ineffective, being drunk and passed out at the table doesn't constitute ineffective assistance of counsel. So you know that people aren't getting represented like they need to.
Yeah.
Indeed. Absolutely.
Thanks so much, Devin.
Thank you. Yeah, I so appreciate that. When I look, I tried to do nonprofit work out of law school. That was what I really wanted to do. I got rejected from so many like legal aid type things, you know, just I wasn't even trying to make money and I was still getting rejected. But yeah, the people that do that work, it's really important. It's like, and especially it is different in the South. There is this different element in the criminal justice system down here, and it is very specifically race-based. And there is a different element.
Not
to
everywhere,
it.
but in certain places.
But the South and the corrections institutions in the South, in particular, there is a history that needs to be addressed, and these types of organizations that do that, it's very helpful.
For as little as $5 a month, you could become a patron of our demonetized small but mighty channel. Tonight we hit the highest crescendo on our channel, 125 live viewers in one time.
That is a big deal for us. We didn't even have that like when I did the Assange or anything.
No, I take it back. I'm wrong. So we did at one time have pretty good numbers. We had over, I think, 200 to 300 live viewers when we did the Assange, but that also had a lot to do with Katie and a number of channels coming in. But on a standalone, and credit to our producer Colin, and obviously with what Jordan was able to bring people in tonight. But, you know, I think, let's say Jordan brought in, 40, 50 people. Once we start getting some good numbers, then the likes happen and the algorithm hits.
And guys, honestly, if you like and subscribe, that helps the most.
Yes,
truthfully.
Absolutely. For $10 a month contributors, here's our Manchin Parliamentarian bumper sticker.
At some point, that's going to be a real thing, you know.
Yeah.
If Joe Manchin runs for no labels and asks the parliamentarian to be his running mate, we have the original bumper sticker.
And for those that donate $25 or become a $25 a month patron, you get yourself the Gin Change jersey.
It's Here Comes the Sun. We're working on changing things over.
Oh, we're definitely working on it.
We're working on it.
What are we doing on the weekends right now?
We have been canvassing for our ballot initiative here in Florida. I'm trying to get my bodily autonomy back. Thank you, Rome's King. It's good to see you. Yeah, for people who don't know and you're new here, in Florida, in about another month or so, we will be living under a 6-week abortion ban here, which is it's a ban. And even in a best case scenario where we get the petition signatures and get it on the ballot for next November and it passes, we in Florida are still going to be living under a 6-week abortion ban for more than a year. And it is extremely scary. I feel like I'm living in The Handmaid's Tale. And you are going to start to see the infant and maternal mortality rates jumping up here. All sorts of problems. All sorts of problems. We've already now seen women that are forced to carry dead fetuses at the risk of getting sepsis. We've seen women forced to wait for an ectopic pregnancy to burst before doctors will perform the D&C on them. And so this is going to be bad. So what we have been working on is trying to regain our bodily autonomy here in Florida. And not for me. I'm not in that age anymore. I just find it so infuriating. I really do. So that's what we've been working on here. And
if you'd like to chip in a few bucks, if you do not want to put your name on the grid, do not want to be a patron every month,
it all helps, guys.
Go to Cash App, $Gen Change. Any amount you can contribute obviously is going to help us. This is not a salaried job. We actually do this because we care. We want to support channels like Status Coup for the work that they are doing.
Yes.
And that is of tantamount importance, especially with what may be coming down the pike.
We need just a small little stipend just so that we can sort of give money to our producer and just be able to do.
They've earned it.
Yeah, we don't make money here. And then whatever else we make goes to service and different community things down here, as well as the occasional nonprofit candidate donation.
We also go live on Thursday night, and that, of course, will be at our regularly scheduled time at 9 p.m. Eastern. We are looking.
We're always Mondays and Thursdays.
We may have 2 guests once again. We have 1 guest that is confirmed.
Which is who?
Friend of the show, former brand new Congress member with Jen. Angelica Duenas is running for Congress in Los Angeles once again.
So we're back into candidate mode. So normally what we'll do is we'll have candidate and then.
Sure, but this is very specific because she unfortunately was recently fired from her job, apparently because she is not really supposed to be campaigning, evidently. There's definitely some layers to it that she will come on our show and discuss. And we are hopefully going to have friend of the show, John Nichols of the Nation, coming on to talk about a number of things that are going on in Wisconsin right now. There's a nice Wisconsin Our Revolution event coming up next month.
We do have nice Wisconsin ties here.
We do.
I feel like we've got some good Wisconsin folk.
The Wisconsin GOP is trying to move heaven and earth to get Janet Prasowitz?
Protasiewicz. I don't know.
Janet Polish is going to.
That's not cool. I say Judge P.
Judge P. They are trying to literally impeach her off the bar already, which is just, well, you know. Listen, the GOP has only one way to play: win at all costs.
But why do they want to impeach her?
Because they know that this is going to hurt them logistically.
And I, as always, props to my fave, Bo of the Fifth Column. He did a really good episode today on that particular indictment, as well as a couple other indictments that are ridiculous that are coming down the pike. But basically what it is in Wisconsin is they don't like that this judge has pointed out the factual gerrymandering that exists in Wisconsin. And as Bo said, and apparently I didn't know this, but apparently if you Google gerrymandered, apparently the first thing that comes up is Wisconsin.
Oh yeah.
And so the fact that this judge mentioned that somehow should disqualify her. Well, that's not what they're really saying. What they're really saying is we don't want her to fix it. If she notices the problem, thinks it's a problem, she might be inclined to fix the problem. And they just don't want that there. They don't want that anywhere.
But they especially don't want it in a upper Midwest state.
Yes.
And as I had mentioned the other day, and you know, we're not obviously going to talk about other content creators, but one point that was made that needs to be clarified, that was in this big debate the other day, is whether or not there's a difference between the Democrats and Republicans. Well, I can tell you at the federal level, there is nary a real difference between the two, because ultimately any of the needs that need to be met for working class people in this country are not met, period, end of discussion. However, when it comes to the state level Democrats, the only state right now that you can literally put on a pedestal are the Minnesota Democrats. So that's upper Midwest. And they have the slimmest of margins. They have a 1-seat margin in the state of Minnesota. And they push through every piece of progressive legislation that they can get their hands on.
Minnesota,
now that is admirable. Why wouldn't it be?
Paul Wellstone State.
Just having free lunch for underserved kids. Like, imagine that being a tough thing to push through.
And it's just so controversial.
Very.
Feed those children. We don't even want to educate them. So screw feeding them.
F them kids.
Do you know, like in other countries, you realize that the state schools, like public schools, provide meals. They get breakfast, they get lunch, and they're good. And somebody did a report not that long ago where they were in another country showing the kids pictures of like what the kids in our public schools eat for lunch. And those kids were like disgusted. They're like, you guys eat that?
Yeah.
Not willingly.
No, I think that there are a lot of positives that can come from continuing to move the needle in the right direction. But even if we are to look at these things logistically, when it comes to, are there any material benefits to having, let's say, Joe Biden as the president versus Donald Trump? Of course, nobody wants to run it back again. I think that that's the last thing that anybody.
I got to see some real factual numbers to support that argument, and I haven't seen them. I have a list of demands. That if my list of demands were to get met, then Joe could earn my vote. And that's that. Now, I don't anticipate any of those things will get done. And so there is that. So
but also by pretending that there isn't a, Dave Weigel of the Washington Post makes a statement to the effect that they didn't allow for there to be a primary against Donald Trump in 2020. Here's the difference, with all due respect. Donald Trump has never had an approval rating in the GOP that was under 93%.
why would they have a primary?
If you have a president
Who is
that is immensely popular, Reagan-esque level popular within their party, there is no point in having a primary because it's wasting time, it's wasting money.
It's not going to go anywhere. Clearly, they're popular in their party. Now, where's Joe's ranking?
2 out of 3 Democrats do not want Joe to run again just based on his mental incapacities alone. This is not even getting into the nook and
That's not even
crannies of how
policy
bad-
based.
It's not even policy based.
Right.
So the idea that you want to compare those two things, where if you look at the polls between RFK, Marianne, and Biden, the highest that Biden gets is in the high 60s.
It's not good.
He is not in any way, shape, or form running away with this nomination.
And Trump was over 90.
That's the difference.
Big difference.
That's really, and what that also shows you is that statistically, an incumbent that is this unpopular will lose in the general election. How can you even discuss this issue without recognizing that the Democratic Party cannot carry its weight at the top? When you have Nikki Haley, of all people, beating Biden in the polls by 6 points, Nikki Haley is beating Joe Biden by 6 points.
Well, and I can tell you, there's a lot of reasons why. First of all, she's not loathsome. I don't like her. I wouldn't support her. She's a war hawk, and she's definitely not somebody that I'm into. But she's not loathsome, and she comes off as very capable and competent. And right now, he doesn't.
Well,
So I mean, she comes off as commanding and competent.
she is as pro
Yeah, again, I'm not a
Ukraine
fan.
war and pro-Israel as anyone there is
Yes.
out there. But to her credit, she did give the type of response that the GOP voting base needed to hear when it came to the issue of abortion. She actually nuanced it in such a way that actually got the GOP, even religious base, to think and made the likes of Mike Pence and Asia Hutchinson look like the damn fools that they are. And you can say that they're old white men and all of this stuff, but the fact is there is this control of women that exists within that older hierarchy of the
Can we
GOP base
address
that is
this?
very significant.
Sorry.
So, like I was saying, this is a very serious issue that she was able to nuance, but it still begs the question that an incumbent president is losing already in the polls at this level, this far out from the election, and they still want to pretend like a primary is not happening. Well, let me ask you this. For the work and effort that these candidates are putting in, do you think that they're going to just endorse the president without a legitimate primary that's actually happening? Or on top of that, who's to say that they're not going to go to Trump, or they're not going to go to Dr. Cornel West, or who ultimately ends up running, let's say, on the Libertarian ticket? Those scenarios are very likely. So the Democratic Party is clearly showing that they have no intention of running the type of primary that's going to work. I need to do something, please. So as you guys will now see, the stupidity of the Democratic Party
I
is
wanted to address that.
Okay, you want to address that first?
I do. I want to address this. I don't know if you're talking about
This person's
me,
a troll.
but what's just so interesting is I don't recall me ever saying I'm withholding my vote from the same party I've supported my entire adult
Okay, who
life.
cares? But you're talking to a person who's a
I
shit
don't know.
poster.
Well, I don't know.
Let's not talk to a shit poster.
I don't know
Forget
that.
shit
Well, you
posters.
always do that when I want it.
We like shit posters because it helps the algorithm.
It does, but
just
it's
doesn't
weird
need
because
to be
I don't
addressed.
recall ever saying I've always supported Democrats because I haven't. I've actually voted Republican before.
Well, again, shit poster. Don't say that. It doesn't.
I'm 52 years old. I voted for a lot of different people in my life. I've been voting for a really long time.
Okay. Well,
So-
anyway, as we have shown, when the leadership of the Democratic Party makes the type of decisions that are so out of sight, out of mind, because they clearly do not have a pulse for where the regular person, where the working class voter is in this country, I give you the governor of New Mexico, who is going out of their way to try to ban guns.
Good luck with that.
I don't know Governor Grisham, but what I do know is that her move is a loser.
Maybe she's friends with Beta.
Well, Daou was the congressional representative of El Paso, which kind of slides
I mean, maybe
underneath New Mexico.
they're buddies there, but I got to tell you, because New Mexico is not going to have that.
Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham said the unusual move was needed after a spate of gun deaths, including of children, but some officials questioned whether it was constitutional. It's not. It's not constitutional at all. And even South Florida's own David Hogue decided to come out and say, this is out of sight, out of mind. You do not know what you're doing. This is not the answer to the actual problem.
Well, it won't withstand any challenge.
New Mexico governor said the state is temporarily suspending open and concealed carry of firearms in Albuquerque and the surrounding county for 30 days, describing the unusual move as a necessary response to gun violence. Okay, first of all, what do you think is going to happen in 30 days by not allowing people to have open carry if it is already in law?
Well, I don't understand why you're assuming that people are going to follow that.
Well, law enforcement has already made it clear that they're not going to follow this, that they will completely disregard her.
I mean, nobody's going to follow this.
But does the governor not understand that she is throwing away any chance that she's going to have of re-election by doing this? This is a vote of no confidence from law enforcement in the state.
Well, maybe she'll get with Beto and they'll run the anti-gun presidential ticket.
Here's an idea. You want to deal with gun violence in America? Deal with the fact that we don't have a living wage, we don't have universal education or health care, and we have qualified immunity for police.
We have a lot of problems.
So when Metalopoly and others are complaining about, oh, you just don't want cops to be trained properly, no, because cops will correct their own issues if you took away qualified immunity.
I'm so tired of those arguments. Cops are trained in you know what? Enough of that. I saw the Uvalde cops standing there doing absolutely nothing for over an hour when one shooter was massacring
and yet
children.
somehow the very people that they deeply and utterly are resentful of, because they know they don't have the courage of, when the firefighters got there, they decided to go right in, didn't hesitate, and they didn't have a gun.
Firefighters would never. Did firefighters go?
In Uvalde? Yeah, that's what they did. The firefighters went in there and helped the kids.
I always said they would.
Yeah.
Like, that was my theory.
No,
that if firefighters were there, they would help.
Of course, but you see, that's the difference. You see, firefighters are the ones on, and remember what today is. You know, yes, the NYPD did their part, but the FDNY literally ran into the towers knowing full well that they were probably running up to their deaths, and they did it anyway.
Yeah, no, there's nothing like firefighters.
It's like a sacred oath.
I love
that
firefighters.
They take. It's like being a Marine. Like, you know that the role you're taking on is one to protect, defend, and serve. That's what is supposed to be here under these circumstances.
Well, but firefighters do it without weapons.
Correct. And so that courage speaks volumes about where the overreach comes into play. Governor Grisham, in my opinion, is doing this to get headlines. She's doing this for attention. She's not really doing this to exact change, because if she wanted to make change, there's a lot of things that you can do. There's a lot of substantial changes that you can make at the state level in order to make it so. Where's the talk of ending qualified immunity? I don't see it. You want the police to protect and serve? You want them to work within the communities to deal with the fact that there was gun violence in places like Santa Fe and Albuquerque, just like there is in any city in the country?
Albuquerque is very, 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 it's a very poor, very blue collar city. And so they probably have suffered a lot. I would think that as a city like that has suffered a lot with a lot of the economic and issues that have been going on. And so, yeah, when people are desperate, they're going to do desperate things. So in places where people are more desperate, yeah, I think you're going to see increased violence. But the idea that somebody thinks, given this country and that guns and weapons is basically the only thing we make anymore, that you're going to just make them go away, it's not feasible. It's not feasible.
In each of the last 2 years, the city of Albuquerque has set records in terms of homicides. Other communities across the country have also experienced bleak increases in gun violence in recent years. This year, Albuquerque is among the many communities that have seen a decrease in homicides, police data shows, though killings in the city are higher than only a few years ago. So
I don't understand that.
But here's the thing. We are living in an era where economic anxiety leads to a lot of these significant problems. And to ignore that reality is to just go along to get along and think, well, it's going to be an all or nothing proposition. That doesn't solve anything. There's a reason why you need political nuance. Kind of like what I mentioned before about a noted content creator who we may not agree with on certain things, but gives platform to those that are really out there making change. So going along to get along in that respect is important. Just like recognizing the nuance that is here when it comes to the governor of New Mexico doing something that is only going to hurt the Democratic Party chances even more than it's already being hurt. You have given so much cannon fodder to the political right by pulling this ish. This is one of the stupidest political moves I've ever seen. What, 30 days? What do you, in 30 days, you're all going to learn your lesson and you're all now going to, be good. And, and now I'm going to allow you to do this again.
Maybe it's just a name recognition thing for her. Just about doing something to get name recognition. Maybe she's gunning for like Kamala's job next time. I don't know.
Whatever the governor is gunning for, she's not gunning for better political numbers. If anything, she has hurt herself significantly, much as the Democratic Party has significantly hurt itself over the last several years. And for those who still are in denial about how bad, yes, bad, President Biden's presidency has actually been, because it's been very bad. And not because there aren't some positive changes in very nook and cranny instances over the last 3 years. Has there been anything significant in any way that has generally benefited the working class in the last 3 years when it was of tantamount importance to move this country to the populist left to avoid the prospect of Donald Trump somehow, some way getting back in the White House again? No, that hasn't happened. It's only gotten worse. And we are of no illusion that, as of right now, President Biden might step in and do something drastic against the United Auto Workers on Friday. Who's to say that he's not going to do it again and try to stop the strike?
Okay, Ghost of Vetus Garolitis. Now I get it. But that's actually really funny.
So,
Your spoken word poetry. Come on, that's good.
I don't know. When I try to make a point, you're just like...
I just think that's funny.
Well, I'm also not smoking like you are.
What? It doesn't matter whether I'm high or not. That's funny.
So more,
Put it up and see if other people think it's funny. I think it's funny.
I think we should just leave it alone, to be honest.
Very unfun.
So we appreciate each and every one of you that have stuck around this evening. We've gone for 2 hours, which is generally longer than we generally go. But in this case, we've obviously had our biggest showing tonight.
Woo-hoo!
We hope you guys have had fun. As we mentioned on Thursday, we are going to have candidate for Congress, Angelica Dueñas, return. Dueñas return. She will be on, and most likely will have on, hopefully, knock on wood,
John Nichols.
John Nichols of the Nation. So if you guys are not currently subscribed, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and also consider becoming a patron or going to Cash App and contributing any amount that you can. We are a small but mighty channel. Our mission is to transform politics into service, and we're trying to do all that we can to, make it so.
We think it's supposed to be a term of service and not a career.
Well, that's what one hopes, but
yeah,
it doesn't necessarily work that way.
Yeah.
So thank you all again. You've all been fantastic. Always great to see everybody in the chat. Some new people in the chat. Yes, we're going to have, okay, Ghost, I'll give you that one. That's fair enough.
It's Vetus Garolitis. Do you know who that is?
No.
He's a tennis player.
Oh.
I actually, what's interesting is I actually saw him in person because he and a bunch of people, like Borg and Bjorn Borg, and a bunch of people used to play at the Turnberry Racket Club near where I lived. And so I was there, and actually I did see Vetus Garolitis there one time. I'm just saying this because I'm a 70s child.
Listen, I am never going to engage with the trolls, but I welcome them to our channel because guess what? Any comment is going to help the algorithm. It's going to get more people to see our channel, It's going to help us grow, however
Yes.
steadily that may be the case. So thank you to everybody in the chat who engages with the trolls, because that makes our job easier.
It helps us. It does.
Topped out at 125 live viewers
It's big
tonight.
for us, guys.
That is big. So hopefully we'll see some bump in the numbers. Hopefully we'll see a little bit of cash in the bank, which will help us to contribute to our producers too, as a matter of fact. One that is doing a phenomenal job behind the scenes as we speak. So with that said, thank you all so very much. Hopefully you have not only subscribed, but click that bell, and we will see you Thursday.